Have you ever said to yourself, you should be something or you should do something?
I should all over myself all the time.
That's not exactly where I was going, but it works. Do you ever stop and question why you should all over yourself?
No, there's usually too much of a mess to deal with to actually get that introspective.
On today's show, we're going to talk about why you shouldn't be shooting all over yourself, and it does not include Pepto-Bismol. But first, this is the Fit Mess, where together we learn to develop habits that help us live beyond our mental health struggles to create happier, healthier lives.
He's Zach. He lives in the future with his anxiety.
He's Jeremy, and he lives in the past with his depression. And we get together once a week in the present to share the obstacles we face and how we overcome them.
Zach, you know me, I can be my own worst enemy when it comes to trying to make self-improvements and things. I like to get in my own way. I like to let myself off the hook. I like to listen to all my limiting beliefs and all the stuff that normally goes along with it.
Don't worry, you're my worst enemy too.
So I'm taking a walk in the woods the other day, listening to an audiobook. It's called Saving Time, and it's written by Jenny Odell. The premise of her book is not so much about how to get more time, how to fit more into your day and optimize your schedule and all that. Ultimately, it comes back to the idea of making the most of the time that you have, because who knows, today could be the last day. You never know. But there was a part of it that stood out to me, and she was talking about that concept, this idea that I think a lot of us in self-development get hung up on is extending our life. So spending tons of time in the gym and counting every calorie and every macro and all these things to make sure that we're doing everything the best we possibly can. And she raises the question, are you really living if you're spending all of your time focused on extending your life? And I felt that familiar pull to like, oh yeah, you don't have to do all this stuff. This is bullshit. You can just just enjoy the moment, man. Just feet up, let's catch some waves and just chill. This is going to be awesome. I wanted to give up. I was like, yeah, totally. Yeah. Why am I so focused? Why am I so worried about this? It's going to be fine. But then all of the work that I've done kicked in and went, no, there's a balance here. You don't go crazy. You don't go off the deep end and focus all of your energy on that. You put in enough to do your best and simultaneously try to enjoy the moment at the same time.
Yeah, this is literally classic 80-20. You'll get 80% of the results with 20% of the effort. And then the last 20% of the results you'll get with 80% of the effort. Like at some point, it's not worth it. Like get the 80% with as minimal effort as you possibly can. And then the rest of it's almost not worth chasing. From a life expectancy perspective, you will waste all of your time trying to get that last little bit. And it's not worth it.
It just reminds me of all of the times that I've been out to a restaurant out somewhere and someone's like, oh, come on, live a little, have a piece of cake or whatever. Okay, yes, that's one thing. And like you're saying, 80-20. But when that turns into, well, the next night, another choice that doesn't meet with what I'm trying to do, another choice that doesn't meet with what I'm trying to do. If you're not measuring it, figuring out what that 20% is, becomes this kind of fuzzy number that you just sort of feel out instead of actually tracking the data to make sure that you're staying on track.
Yeah. I mean, I don't track it anymore because I've got it pretty dialed in. But some weeks it's 70-30, some weeks it's 90-10, right? It's not always 80-20, but yeah, if you are thinking you're 80-20 and you're not tracking it, my guess is that you're closer to 50-50.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this isn't, I don't mean for this to be like a diet talk. That's just the sort of the relatable thing to talk about. But I mean, all of the stuff that we talk about here, whether it's going to the gym, meditating, yoga, all breath work, cold plunges, all the stuff that we talk about, it's so easy to look, even, in our Facebook community the other day, somebody was talking about how the great thing about us is that we do all these extraordinary things. And I kind of chuckled because I was like, they must seem extraordinary on the outside because they don't feel extraordinary. When I'm sitting in an ice cold river down the street, that doesn't feel extraordinary to me. When I'm in the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, that doesn't feel extraordinary to me. When I'm stopping eating at 8 o'clock at night, that doesn't feel extraordinary to me. But I get that from the outside, from someone who hasn't begun this path, all of that stuff seems like, oh, that's crazy. Because I remember having that conversation with you a number of times and going, are you nuts? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And now it's just like a habit. It's just a thing that I just do.
Again, same thing, like 80% of the people on the planet, you're doing more than they are doing, right? So to you, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but to everyone else, it's like, oh, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of things you're doing.
The other part of this that comes up for me that I think maybe is why I was so triggered by it, or why it became so important to me in the moment anyways, is, I'm 46. And
So old.
sometimes it feels like it. Sometimes I feel like I'm 22. Usually when I'm telling fart jokes. But there is a ticking of the clock that seems to get louder every day.
Mm-hmm. By the way, that's called tinnitus. That's why it's getting louder, old man.
The pressure to succeed, the pressure to become whatever, all of it, it just feels like it gets more and more every day. And I feel myself living in this tug of war between, like, I have everything I want. I'm happy. I should do more. I should. And so when I see a book like this called Saving Time, that plays to that urgency for me. Like, how much can I squeeze in? How can I make the best of my schedule? How can I make sure that I'm knocking out everything I can in the most efficient way possible? Because I feel time running out, but I also don't necessarily have a finish line that I'm running toward. There's not necessarily a destination. So it's a weird place to be in, where I'm trying to figure out the balance between making the most of this moment, being happy in this moment, and pursuing this elusive feeling of having made it, having success. Like, I have it. So I'm in this weird place of trying to figure out, what does it mean? What am I still pursuing? And why am I pursuing it when I have everything that I want?
It is an interesting balance. I mean, we were, or at least I was raised with, like always shooting for the next thing, right? I grew up with, and when you're done with school, you do this thing, and you go to college, and then you get the job, and then you go do this. Like, it's always the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And, we talk a lot about the journey and how important that is. It's not really the end result. It's getting there and who you become in the process, and being happy and being okay with that. I think a lot of, what you're talking about, I keep thinking about self-compassion, right? Where, just being okay and content with who you are and where you are and when you are in your life is a really hard skill to learn, because nobody taught us that. It's always the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Do this right, do that right, or you're going to fail and be miserable your whole life. And that's really hard to learn. I think both of us have gotten, much further in that journey than we would have had we not been curious about ourselves and asked questions. And, I know I'm not there myself. I don't think I'll ever get there, but I do have the knowledge and the power to stop myself and go, wait a minute. You are good where you are. You're okay. Like, everything's fine. You're not dying at this particular moment. Maybe you will tomorrow, but it's definitely a learned skill. Like, it doesn't just come naturally. You do have to force it somewhat.
Yeah. The phrase that keeps popping up in my head is that idea of stop shoulding all over yourself. Like, stop telling yourself all the things you should be doing. Most of the time, I think that is, societal pressure that you put on yourself to measure up to someone else's expectation. And if you can develop that skill, and the one that says, fuck the expectation, I'm going to do what's right for me, that's where I think you can start to find some of that peace. Or maybe I can. I don't know.
I think any of us can, right? We can always do better in that arena. There's always going to be room for improvement until the day you die, right? We're never going to get there 100%. And again, that goes back to the journey, not the end goal, because the goal is to be content all the time with who you are. None of us are ever going to get there. But to be able to recognize that you can choose to be content. You make that choice. It's never going to come a day where you're just done and you're content and there's never anything else you have to do. You'll have moments of it. And when you do have those moments, like, take them in, savor them. But it's always a choice. It's always a choice. You choose to be content, or you choose to want more. It's up to you. When I should on myself, I make sure I'm near a bathroom because it's about to get messy.
Well, I would be curious to know, you, the listener, when you should on yourself, what are the shoulds you tell yourself? What's missing from your life? What pressure do you put on yourself that maybe is not necessary? We'd love to hear from you in our Facebook group. You can find the link to that on our website in the show notes for this episode at thefitmess.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter there if that is more your thing, and email us that way. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back at thefitmess.com in just a few days with a brand new episode. Thanks for listening.
See you, Ron.
We know this podcast is amazing and doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.